Child sacrifice unto the Islamic gods, next on One Nation. Hello, America. Welcome to One Nation. I'm your host, Dr. Jake Jacobs. On October 7th, 2023, we saw Hamas Palestinian Nazi butchers mutilate and massacre hundreds of Jewish babies unto the gods of their perverted Islamic ideology. All across America and the world, there have been massive pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine rallies from Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland, Phoenix, Chicago, Milwaukee, Nashville, Philadelphia, and in London, England, Paris, France, Amsterdam, and even in New York City. Let's take a look at a recent massive rally in New York City, more specifically in Queens to be exact, to hear the stupid, illogical, actually immoral thinking of these pro-Hamas supporters. Here goes.
For blocks on end, this crowd rallied down Steinway Street in Astoria.
We're so surprised with all of the people that came. It feels like such a community, and we're all just coming together.
They're calling attention to the lives that have been lost in Gaza this week and the ongoing plight of Palestinian people.
We are here. We are their voice. We're here to support the cause. We're here to make sure that everybody knows that Palestine has to be free.
They tell us attacks against their people have increased here in the States since the war broke out.
I have seen an increase in kind of hatred towards Muslims in general because people assume that, all Muslims are correlated with that.
People came from far and wide in support of their neighbors.
Because we are Muslim, we gotta support our brothers and sisters.
All races, all ethnicities, all religions. It's just really nice. A bunch of flags. So it's really nice.
Anytime you have an oppressive situation, people are not getting basic human rights. It's important, no matter your race, religion, ethnicity, for you to show up and to do your part to make sure that everybody's getting the care they need.
People here say it was important for them to come out and speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, because today may be someone else's community and tomorrow might be theirs.
Absolutely disgusting. Speak up for those who can't speak up for themselves. Who speaks for those hundreds and thousands of Israelis, of Jewish babies that were butchered, that were massacred? I mean, this amalgamation of militant Muslims and snowflake wokocrats, these kids that don't know anything about what's really going on in Israel, in Palestine, are actually there saying, we're here, we're such a community, we're here to support the cause, right? All races, all ethnicities, all religions, and there's a whole bunch of flags. You think they're talking about Jews? You think they have the Magen David, the flag of Israel, flying? If somebody was in that crowd flying the flag of Israel, I guarantee you they would have beaten the crap out of them and possibly killed them. That has happened in London. It happened in New York City earlier. It happened in Los Angeles. When anybody pro-Israel supporters came up with the flags of Israel, they were being attacked. That's a bunch of hooey hogwash that all ethnicities, all religions were really, this is a really nice thing going on here. Absolute insanity what's happening in my country. Now, not only is this happening in cities all across America, all across the world, it's happening at the core area that is disseminating Jew hate. Jew hate across the United States and across the world at universities. It could be Columbia. It could be Berkeley. It could be UW-Madison. It could be the University of Sorbonne. Actually, in New York City, you see radical students who are part of an organization on college campuses called Justice in Palestine, who carry signs that say, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." Now, please, this is so important for us to understand. When they say from the river, they mean the River Jordan. I used to live right by the River of Jordan in northern Israel in Kibbutz Kinneret a long time ago. They mean from the Jordan River in Israel. The west side, of course, is in Israel. The east side is in Jordan. That's why they call it the West Bank, which is really Judea, Samaria. I'd rarely call it West Bank. It's the land of Israel. It's the biblical land of Judea, Samaria. But from the western side of the Jordan River all the way to the Mediterranean will be what they call this imaginary state called Palestine. It is really euphemistic language for the annihilation, for the extermination of the Jews in the land of Israel. It makes me think of General Titus when he destroyed the temple in 70 A.D., or Emperor Hadrian, that Jewish hater, the anti-Semitic Jewish hater, who said, "The name of Israel shall be remembered no more. I now call this area Palestina." There has never been a state called Palestine. There are the Philistines, the pagan inhabitants of the area, which is Gaza today, that have been at war with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, for thousands of years. That's what we see manifested today. But I want you to hear a short clip of what the meaning from the river to the sea actually means. Here goes.
From the river to the sea. But what does it really mean? Those hearing this for the first time probably don't know that this is a call to action against Jews. It calls for the establishment of a state of Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, erasing the state of Israel. You heard that right. This isn't a message of peace. It's a call for the end of the world's only Jewish state and its people. That's how this phrase is anti-Semitic, and that's why it's so hateful. And by the way, it's also the opposite of a two-state solution to the conflict. It's been used for decades as a rallying cry for anti-Israel activists and terrorist groups like Hamas. Now, despite its hateful message, we are seeing this all around the world, especially during Hamas's terror assault on Israel. On college campuses, in Germany, where calls for the elimination of Israel are banned, Minette Soccer Club suspended their player Anwar al-Ghazi over a post accusing Israel of genocide and ending with this phrase. In Austria, where police banned a pro-Palestinian protest for using the phrase and characterizing it as a call to violence. So let's be clear. Advocating for Palestinian statehood is not anti-Semitic, but calling for the elimination of the Jewish state, that is.
It most certainly is. And it's interesting to note that when this clip started out, it was actually in a high school in San Francisco. So many of American high schools, government-run high schools, public high schools, have been taken over by the wokocrats, by hardcore leftists, who are not only anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, but anti-American. They don't teach American citizenship. They don't teach American constitutional republicanism. What they teach is radicalism and how to teach young people to be activists, radical leftist activists, and it's a shame. And that phrase, from the river to the sea, is actually a term that's equated to when Hitler used to call for the final solution of the Jewish question. In essence, the annihilation, the extermination of the Jews, not only in Israel, but around the world. People forget that's a part of the Hamas charter from 1988. It wasn't just for the destruction of Israelis or Jews in Eretz Israel, the land of Israel. It was for the annihilation, the extermination of the Jews around the world. Now, there's an organization called MEMRI TV, Middle Eastern Media Research Institute. It was established many years ago by individuals who were concerned that on Islamic television around the Middle East were actually forms of propaganda, brainwashing, indoctrination, and it was actually the expression, the dissemination of jihad or holy war, Islamic holy war ideology. And so what they do is they chronicle and they keep on record the absolute fanaticism of Islamic jihadism across the Middle East. And I want you to hear now, for you who are watching live, you're going to be able to see the translation in English. He's going to be speaking Arabic, of course. This is one of the top heads of Hamas about 3.5, 4 years ago, who is calling for the extermination, the annihilation of the Jews, not only in Israel, but around the world. So let's take a short listen to this fanatical jihadi calling for the extermination of the Jews. Here goes. If we die, it will be a while we are killing you and cutting off your heads, Allah willing. If you don't lift the siege, we will explode in the face of our enemies, Allah willing. And the explosion won't just be in Gaza, it will also be in the West Bank and abroad, Allah willing. Our brothers abroad are still preparing. They're warming up. They have been warming up for a year and a half. And you 7 million Palestinians abroad, enough warming up. There are Jews everywhere. They must attack every Jew on planet Earth. We must slaughter and kill them with Allah's help. Enough warming up. And I say to those in the West Bank, and how long will you sit in silence? You can buy knives with 5 shekels. How much is the neck of a Jew worth to us? It isn't worth 5 shekels. By Allah, the Jews will be killed. Our explosive belts, Allah willing. There are new factories of explosive belts, and they're warming up. Anyone who wants one can take his turn. You can have one. By the mediators and the Zionist enemy, hear this message. If we die, we die, but we will die with honor while attacking and not retreating. We will die with the exploding and the cutting of necks and the legs of Jews. We will lacerate them and tear them to pieces, Allah willing. That's the nature of the enemy. These are the butchers who on October 7, 2023 invaded Israel, and they mutilated, they desecrated, they exterminated, they burnt to death, and they cut off the heads of Jewish babies and Jews throughout the land. They must be exterminated. Now, to give you a sense of this fanaticism that goes back 14 centuries in Islam, the ideology of Islamic jihad, let's just look at some of the things that have been captured by the fanatics about the killing of Jews. Here goes. The jihad against the Jews is a mandatory jihad. Remember, that means holy war. The first is the cleansing of Palestine of the filth of the Jews. That the Nazis used to call it Judenrein, cleanse of the Jews. Here's another one. We will chop off their heads. That's exactly what Hamas did on October 7, 2023. These are kids. These are Islamic Muslim children being taught this from little kids on. Here's another one. I will shoot the Jews. This is an 8-year-old girl on Middle Eastern Hamas television saying that she, when she gets older, will kill the Jews. And this brainwashing, this indoctrination starts at a little age, and by the time they're 16, 17 years old, they consider them to be muhajadeen or jihadi, holy warriors for the cause. Now, you know, I have an excellent book in my library called Why the Jews. It's by Dennis Prager. I highly recommend Prager University. It's a great way to get educated on and many factors in American and world history. But Dennis Prager wrote a book called Why the Jews. It goes back in history. It goes back to the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It goes back to the time period of the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Romans. Goes back to the persecution during the Crusades and by various Catholic expressions or Protestant expressions, unfortunately. It goes back to Islamic, the development of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula when they took over Jerusalem and Damascus and Cairo and went through the north, up through Lebanon and Syria and spread east into India. And they went through Cairo and west through northern Africa up into Spain and stopped at the Battle of Tours, calling for the extermination of Jews and Christians who did not submit to Allah through the prophet Muhammad. Here's just a short clip on the history of jihad, which means holy war in Arabic or Islam. Here goes.
Ever since 9/11, we've been told that Islam is a religion of peace. But in the history of jihad, from Muhammad to ISIS, Islamic scholar Robert Spencer shows that Islamic terrorism is as old as Islam itself. After all, it was Muhammad who said, "I have been made victorious through terror." The history of jihad is the first one-volume history of its kind in the English language to tell the whole truth about Islam's bloody history. 1,400 years of Islamic war on the rest of the world.
We'll be back for the rest of the story in a moment. Welcome back to One Nation. You know, when I moved from Arizona to Wisconsin and started my teaching job in the state of Wisconsin, I would go to a number of conferences down in Madison. University of Wisconsin-Madison would have a number of conferences teaching teachers how to teach on various topics. And I was blown away because I found that many of the teachers were socialists, were Marxists, or hardcore leftists, and they wanted me to take that brainwashing, indoctrination claptrap back to the classroom and then teach my students on various topics. I wouldn't do it. One of the conferences I went to was in August of 1989, and it was a conference that was on Islam. In fact, I won a certificate when I was down there. Here's a certificate. It's a certificate of participation and recognition of attendance and involvement in two-day teaching seminar entitled The Arab World and Islam, Teaching Priorities and Techniques, held at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, August 11th and 12th of 1989. Now, I got to tell you something. This was a two-day conference. I have the certificate right here. In fact, I've kept it after all these years. At this conference, the first day I went just to listen, just to hear what they had to say. They gave me a Quran. They gave me a number of books about the peaceful, loving, wonderful religion that Islam was about. And they gave me teaching units, and they gave me all kinds of paraphernalia and things that I could bring back to the classroom and teach my young students about the glory of Islam, the beauty of Islam, the peaceful nature of Islam. So the first day, I kept quiet. But it was on the second day, I began to get a feel for what was going on, and I realized they were brainwashing those students. I was older at the time. I started teaching a little bit later because I've been traveling around the world, living in Israel, etc. And a lot of these young students, 22, 23 years old, were buying it hook, line, and sinker that Islam means peace. It's salam, Islam, it means peace, right? And that it was essentially a peaceful religion. So I raised my hand and I said, excuse me, but how come you haven't talked about jihad? And they go, well, jihad in Arabic words, they have like dual meanings. I understand that. The word shalom, it means hello. It means goodbye. It also means peace. Peace within the home, primarily with God Almighty guiding the home, the family. In Islam, too, the words like salam can mean hello, goodbye. It can mean peace, but it also can mean, it actually within its roots can mean the peace of Islam that controls the Jews and the Christians underneath them, or the infidels underneath them. And it's like the word jihad. The word jihad has this meaning of the idea of submission unto Allah. But even more than that, jihad means holy war. And I brought this out to the audience, to the students, to the professors, and I immediately became persona non grata. I immediately was told that I was in error. And then I simply said, let's talk a little bit about the history of Islam, the spread of Islam. Once Muhammad was convinced that the Jews and the Christians and Bedouins and other cultures in the Arabian Peninsula were not going to accept his interpretation of Allah through the Prophet Muhammad, he began to actually gather together an army. He was a general, General Muhammad, and he began to spread Islam through the sword. All you got to do is look at the flag of Saudi Arabia, where it says, Allah is great, and you must know him, or Allah is great through his messenger Muhammad, and it has a sword underneath. Islam was spread through militancy, through holy war. They took over Jerusalem and Cairo and Damascus and North Africa, up into Spain, all throughout the Middle East, through the sword, through militant jihadi armies. And it was bloody and it was ruthless. And they cut off the heads of thousands and thousands of Jews and Christians and many others. And people don't recognize this. So I exposed them at that conference. And of course, they weren't too happy about me actually talking about the historical reality of Islam. Now, that started in 1989, and what people do not recognize is that starting in the late 80s, there was developed the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the origin of Hamas, was actually the development of the infiltration of pro-Islamic indoctrination and propaganda in American schools, K through 12, and at American universities. And I saw it. I was there. I saw firsthand. They gave you the Quran. They gave you pro-Islamic books. They didn't talk about jihad. They didn't talk about the militant nature of Islam. That was never brought up at this conference. And so therefore there was these organizations like Palestine Solidarity Committee, Palestine Youth Movement, American Palestinians for Palestine, American Muslims for Palestine. There was even the left-wing Marxist Jewish Voice for Peace, Young Democratic Socialists of America, and many other groups that were coming together disseminating Jew hate across the country. Here is a classic example that I showed you earlier of Students for Justice in Palestine. They have infiltrated America since the late 1980s under the guise of educating Americans about the beautiful, peaceful aspects of Islam. Now, thank God that Governor DeSantis, who's been so smart about so many things, the evil nature of leftism, wokeism. Look, at just a few days ago, he's now passed, it says here, Governor DeSantis orders first ban on U.S. on pro-Palestinian student group accused of harmful support of the terrorist. This is 2023. I saw this stuff in the late 1980s, and they have grown and grown from Berkeley to Madison to Columbia and across the country. Now, I've had the honor of working with Robert Spencer at Young Americans for Freedom, who's written the book, The Religion of Peace, The Real Muhammad. He's outlawed now. He can't go to England because they say he hates Muslims. He just exposes the reality of the Islamic fanaticism going back to Muhammad. But another gentleman that I've worked with through YAF is a gentleman by the name of Burgess Owens. We worked in a YAF event in Chicago a few years back. Listen to what he has to say about indoctrination at American colleges. Here goes.
Congressman Burgess Owens is in focus now, member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and Education and Workforce Committee. Great to have you, Congressman. First of all, tell me about the journey that America is having right now with anti-Semitism.
Well, Harris, this has been a journey we've been on for quite a while. It's been because we've been indoctrinated by termites. Ideological termites called Marxists. And this has been going on for a long time. The reason why I've been so excited about being part of this solutions of education is that we've seen our country, our kids are coming out literally hating everyone. We've dealt with the last couple of years of blacks hating whites, having their own dormitories, having their own graduations. This is an outgrowth. I had no idea how bad it was getting until now I see how heartless our kids are. I understand, I grew up in a generation, my dad came back from World War II. And not only did they go out and fight evil, they came back and built a remarkable middle class and then went out and helped those countries that used to be our enemies to become our friends. Their heart was all about helping, delivering service. We have a group of kids coming out today that have no heart. They deny evil, they applaud evil. That is not the American way. So it comes down to us is we have to make sure that the outcomes are much better than they have been. We have to hold these colleges accountable. If they cannot give us a good product, those who love our country, love others, go out there and produce, we need to make sure we're pulling back funds. It is a great time in our country that we finally understand the curtain's been pulled back. And we now see that within our own nation, we're developing enemies to our own nation. And we cannot allow that to happen to our good kids who have so much great potential, but they're being indoctrinated by these Marxists in these colleges, particularly Ivy League colleges.
See, Burgess Owens is spot on. I have been teaching this and saying this for well over 40 years. I've been there. I lived in the land. I've experienced Judenhass, Jew hate, firsthand. David Horowitz has written the book Dark Agenda, The War to Destroy Christian America. When you have an amalgamation of queers for Palestine, lesbians for Palestine, Marxists for Palestine, the Socialist Squad, Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Black Lives Matter for Palestine, this leftist, wokocrat, Marxist, it's amalgamation of those who hate the United States of America, and they hate Jews, and they hate Israel. And they are at war with the Judeo-Christian worldview, with the holy scriptures of God Almighty. As they cry out, death to America, death to Israel, we must expose them for what they are, and we must not acquiesce to their demands. We must stand up to them and say, not on our watch will we allow you to get away with your diabolical hatred. America is our republic under God is about life and liberty. Hamas and Islamic jihad is about death and massacre. And I say, let's destroy Hamas and bring peace to Israel. Thank you.